Hi everyone, Stepan here. Today I'm going to share my entire repertoire for black against d4. We're going to have a look at all the openings white could play, and I'm going to focus on ideas, strategic themes, and things you can apply even if you're out of book, instead of going over numerous theoretical lines. And the full repertoire, the PGN and everything is below. So we're going to have a look at 10 different openings, so to speak, although some chapters are going to be in transpositions. Firstly, we're going to start with the Blackmar-Diemer Gambit, which is an absurd opening, to say the least, but we have to get it out of the way. I keep facing it. It's not a good opening, but if you don't know what to do against it, then you could be in trouble. Then our next topic is going to be sort of the main skeleton of the opening, which is the Queen's Gambit, since we are going to be playing d5 against d4. So this is a d4, d5 repertoire. And against the Queen's Gambit, we are going to accept the Gambit. Next, we're going to have a look at the London system with 2 bishop f4. That's very different to the London with 2 knight f3, which we are going to address in the 4th chapter, which are knight f3 transpositions. So what happens on d4, d5, knight f3? What are the ways white could get us out of our comfort zone and into all different openings, such as the London, the Torre, the Catalan, and so on. Next up, we will be looking at the Jobava London, so knight c3, bishop f4. Which, I have a system that I play against it. I have a couple, but today I'm going to recommend something that's very simple, that's going to make playing against it relatively easy. After that, we're looking at Catalan systems, and in our case, since the main thing in our opening is accepting the Queen's Gambit, we aren't going to be entering the Catalan the standard way. Not after d4, d5, c4, and then at some point g3, because we will have already taken on c4 immediately after 2c4, therefore depriving white of the option to go into a standard Catalan. After that, we're looking at 4 offbeat openings. The Stonewall in reverse, which the engines say it's bad. I have a perfect score against it personally, because I've been using the same system over and over again that just works. I'm going to teach you how to do that today. Next up, we have the Pseudo Trompowsky. So when white plays bishop g5, it has different names as well. So d4, d5, bishop g5. Next up, the Colle System and the Colle Zuckertort. So when white plays this very passive setup with d4, e3, knight f3, bishop d3, and the Colle Zuckertort when they play b3 and bishop b2 as well. And then finally, we're going to have a look at the Richter-Veresov Attack, which, in my opinion, is a pretty good opening. So 10 different chapters, 10 different, opening systems, or more than 10, but I've divided it into 10 chapters to make it easier to follow. Again, we're focusing on ideas. Let's begin. The entire repertoire is available on Nocti. You can easily access it by following the link in the description. And what I do with Nocti is I practice all of my repertoires rather than studying a bunch of theoretical lines. So as you can see, I don't even know how many. Every repertoire I'm trying to study, and every video I'm doing a repertoire for, is on Nocti. You can access all of them. And then what you can do, instead of studying a bunch of theoretical lines, you can actually gain experience against a human-like opponent. Nocti is going to play the variations I'm about to show in the video. And that way you gain practical experience instead of just going over a bunch of lines. I think that's a much more effective way to study. So select the time control, select Nocti's strength, select the color. This is an opening repertoire for black. So let's start playing with black. Let's see what Nocti does. Okay, d4. Oh, it's either going to go for the Stonewall or the Colle Zuckertort. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, okay, I don't want to spoil our repertoire, but this is what you can do. You get immediate feedback, which is a great thing. You can review your games afterwards. If you need hints, you can get hints. And there are other things that are incredible about Nocti as well. My favorite one is themes, where you can practice any position you want against Nocti, so not just openings. So these are mine. Whenever I prepare for a game, this is against Željko Bedić, this is against Lovro Čupić. These are some positions that I was trying to figure out, exchange Caro-Kann with no bishop d3 and so on. You can practice any positions you want. There are many other things, such as flashcards. You can connect your accounts and get your online games on Nocti, and then it's going to tell you exactly what you need to focus on. Nocti is great. If you want to check it out, follow the link in the description. If you decide to go premium, even though you get a lot for free by just following the link, use the code Hanging Pawns for a massive 64% discount. The Repertoire PGN is also available on my Patreon page, such as every other repertoire I've created recently and many opening PGNs. You can purchase it separately for $4 US, or you can join my Patreon page, help support the channel for just $4 US a month, and gain access to all of these repertoires: the English, Dutch and Bird, QGD, Nimzo, Caro-Kann, King's Indian, Anti-King's Indian, French, Vienna, Colle, QGD, Ponziani, E4 for white, D4 for white, the Spanish, the Italian, the London system, the Caro-Kann. I mean, there are so many here that I cannot list them all, as well as 500 other posts. So if you want to gain access to the repertoire, follow the link in the description and help support the channel. Now let's go back to the video. We're starting with the Blackmar-Diemer Gambit. So the opening after d4, d5 can still be anything you could see in this video, but let's deal with the most absurd first. White plays e4. You can face this with white as well. If you play d4, and then at some point white plays e5, sacrificing the pawn, that's fairly similar, and it's not good to do that with either color. So against this, we are just going to take the pawn. White is going to play knight c3. We are going to play knight f6, defending the pawn. And now there will be two variations. One in which we give the pawn back for a great strategic advantage and for the bishop pair. And the other, which is the main line and much more popular, in which we just keep the pawn. So let's go over the line where we give the pawn back first. So white plays the move bishop g5. The idea behind bishop g5 is, of course, to undermine the defense of e4. So we go bishop f5, defending the pawn. They take our knight, giving up the bishop pair. That's very important. ef, our bishop is now wide open. And then they go queen e2. And we have no way to defend the pawn. We don't want to take on d4 with our queen, because there is queen b5 check, there is rook d1, there is knight b5 attacking the queen and the c7 pawn. That would be devastating. So instead, we simply go knight c6. And in this case, now this move has never been played in a serious game, but it's a very good move. We're attacking d4. Now, white really should not take on e4 here. If white takes on e4, white is losing after the simple queen e7, and you have no way to defend the knight. If you play f3, I take on d4, and my knight is no longer pinned to my queen. Once you move your queen away, we take on e4. If you move your queen away to e3, I go knight c2 check and pick up your queen. So after knight c6, white should castle, and notice that we don't have a way to defend the pawn again. Technically, the engine says knight takes d4 is the best move, but I would advise you not to go into that line, so I haven't recommended it. Instead, just bishop e7, knight e4, and castles. And this here is a great position for black. We have the bishop pair. White's king is way less safe than our king. And white only has one way to sort of complicate things, and that's g4. Now be careful. You don't want to go bishop g6 because f4, f5 is coming. Instead, we seemingly passively retreat to c8, keeping all of our pieces active. And if they go f4, we go f5. With a massive advantage, this has to be taken. Otherwise, we're just going to win the pawn, or we're eventually going to take on d4 or take the knight. So this is taken, bishop takes f5, and again, the bishop pair, target on d4, target on f4. we're going to go rook e8, pinning the knight to the queen, and so on. So this line with bishop g5 really isn't scary. That doesn't mean that the main line with f3 is scary. It's not. It's very bad. So one thing you have to keep in mind is that white wants to play bishop c4, recapture on f3 with the knight, and put pressure on f7. That's their most basic trick. So we are going to take, they recapture with the knight, and here people play many things with black, but we're going to play the incredibly useful c6. This may seem offbeat, but the reason we go c6 here is to prevent d5 in all variations, to prevent knight b5 in conjunction with bishop f4, to prevent bishop b5 checks at an opportune moment for white, and to consolidate our position before white commits with the bishop. That's one of the main ideas here. So white has to move the bishop somewhere. If they go bishop c4, and this is probably the most important part, you cannot go bishop g4. If you go bishop g4 here, bishop takes f7, king f7, knight e5 check, a double attack on the bishop, and white's winning. So instead we go bishop f5. And after white castles, again, we have to be careful. Bishop takes f7, king takes, knight e5 check, your bishop is attacked by the rook. So the last careful prophylactic move we have to play is bishop to g6. Now everything is safe, we're up a pawn, white isn't threatening anything. A move like knight e5 is completely meaningless. We're just up a pawn, d4 is weak, we're going to go knight d7, bishop d6, queen c7, put pressure on e5, d4, and h2, and on a high level, this is game over. Now, if they don't go bishop c4, if they go bishop d3, we can go bishop g4, which is the most active move, because, of course, there is no bishop f7, and we just do the same thing, except we don't have to play bishop g6 passively. So let's assume castles, e6, I don't know. For example, bishop e3, knight bd7. We just keep lining up our pieces. And you can also just take on f3. I like taking on f3 actually to prevent knight e5. But basically, the Blackmar-Diemer is not a scary opening to face. I wanted to get that out of the way so that we can move on to the actual openings now. The Queen's Gambit. So d4, d5, c4. As you probably know, I played a semi-Slav with black most of the time. But in my recent tournament in Wroclaw, I faced the Queen's Gambit accepted and won a really nice game as white. And that got me thinking, there are really no great ways for white to deal with the Queen's Gambit accepted if they don't start with 2 knight f3, because there are some tricks there. If they start with d4, c4, I think black is at least equal in all the lines, which is why the Queen's Gambit accepted is a very popular opening. So first of all, we're going to have a look at knight f3, e4, e3, knight c3, and queen a4. All the moves are in the repertoire below, so don't worry if you don't remember everything, and also follow along with the repertoire. That's going to make things easier. The repertoire also isn't, too wide and too complicated. It's very easy to follow. The goal of this video is to enable you to play as black against d4 within an hour. Okay, so let's begin with knight f3, because that's, I would say, the main line still. The main idea of our repertoire is going to be the move a6. Not to play b5 here to defend the pawn. If black played b5 straight away, then white would have the option to go a4, undermining the structure, followed by b3, destroying the entire queen side. We don't care about our c-pawn. We care about gaining a tempo against white's bishop when it recaptures on c4. So knight f6. Now they can take on c4, against which we eventually play b5, or they can play a4. And I think this is the only critical line in the entire repertoire. This is the only line I fear. So against this, what we're going to do is we're going to speed up our development and just allow black to take, white to take on c4, and we are going to ignore them. Now, a4 is a very committal move. It's a very committal move because it gives away these two squares. They can never be patched up again. So eventually, a knight or a bishop could land on those squares. So a4 is committal, whereas our pawn is still on a6, and we have the c pawn. Therefore, b6 and b5 are covered. So when white plays a4, they're committing to having two potential weaknesses on the queen side. They are weaknesses if we can occupy them, but, you know. Okay, so bishop g4. They take on c4, we go e6. We want rapid development. There are many things white could do here. They could play knight c3, against which we go knight c6. Let's say castles, bishop d6, pressure on the king side, say bishop e2, castles. They can also castle straight away, against which, once again, we go knight c6. It might be strange that we're not playing c5, but we want to keep all the squares covered, and it's not like white can easily disrupt our knight. They still have to play e4. So, for example, knight c3, bishop d6, once again, same sort of setup. Bishop e2, we are transposing, castles, they can throw in h3, bishop h5, maybe bishop d2, queen e7. We are basically playing against this bad bishop and against these two weaknesses. So you can see that a move like knight b4 is playable straight away. Okay, so that's what happens if they play knight f3, which isn't a very critical line. The most critical way to play is e4, the so-called Saduletto variation, which is, you know, what I play as white when I face the Queen's Gambit. And against this, most people are going to go e5. e5 is the main line. It's the most well-known move. We're going to do something very strange that people are not going to expect. We're going to play the Rubinstein. Now, not many of you have heard of this probably, but the Rubinstein defense is an incredible way to fight e4. And, you know, experienced players who play the Queen's Gambit are going to know this, but many of your opponents are going to be confused. So what do you do here as white? You don't want to take on c5. That would make no sense. I can trade queens, play e5, recapture on c5 very easily. You don't want to allow me to take. So technically you could go knight f3 defending, but when I take on d4 and you recapture with the queen, queen takes d4, knight takes d4, something like bishop d7. Black has this pawn majority on the queen side, which is going away. White has to recapture. And after that, black has, you could call this an initiative actually, because e4 is under fire. Moving the e-pawn is going to be very, very hard. So for example, after knight c3, e6, black has no bad pieces, and black's position is perfectly equal. And this is with best play for white if they go knight f3. So we have avoided all the problems. But most people, and this is the case for almost 90% of Grandmaster games, are going to want to keep their center, and they're going to be tempted to play the move d5. And this is what we want. Technically, it is the best move for white, but it's very difficult to play those positions. So we go knight f6. Defend. You can play queen a4, conceivably, but most people are going to want to defend their pawn. You don't want to play f3. If you play f3, this is much, much better for black after e6. The center just crumbles completely. So after d5, knight f6, most people play knight c3. Now you could still go e6. That's a fine move. But we have a trick up our sleeve. We're going to play b5. The pawn is immune. The pawn is immune because e4 is hanging. If knight b5, queen a5 check, knight c3, you have to save the knight, followed by knight takes e4 is a big advantage for black from a human perspective. For engines, it's, you know, a slight advantage for black, but we have just traded our b-pawn for their e-pawn. d5 is isolated and weak, and we have no bad pieces, so I'd want to take black here. So after b5, they can play e5, for example, which is good. They can also play bishop f4. There are many moves white could play here, but basically we are keeping our center intact, queen side intact and solid, and we are provoking white into expanding in the center with their two connected pawns. So b4, they have to take, if they move the knight, we take on d5. So takes, bc3. They should take bc3 because taking on e7 comes with a check, and taking on g7 is completely losing. If they take, then c3 cannot be recaptured. So after bc3, we have many moves here, but I like ef6. And after bishop c4, simply bishop d6 and castles. And the material is equal, technically, but we have this firm blockade of the d-pawn, and we actually use the d-pawn as shelter for our pieces, so I like this position for black. There are other moves white could play you can find in the repertoire against this c5 idea, but the main thing is what happens if they play d5. Now e3 is going to transpose to knight f3 most of the time. You can find that in the repertoire, but let's address the very strange knight c3. Knight c3 is not a good move, in my opinion, and we go a6 again. White really should go a4. Well, excuse me. White really should go a4 to prevent b5, but I can also go e3. That's a perfectly playable move. And after e3, we're just going to continue developing with knight f6. They recapture on c4, e6, and eventually we play b5. We are transposing to the lines with knight f3 as soon as they play knight f3. However, a4 is the critical move. And against this, we go knight c6. We aren't playing b5, obviously, there's a pawn there. So after this, after knight c6, knight f3, knight f6, e4, which is the idea behind knight c3, we go bishop g4, putting pressure on d4. They have to defend, so bishop e3, and now we take. Queen takes loses the d-pawn, we tempo on the queen, so they have to take gf3. And now we play knight a5, keeping our pawn, and good luck getting that pawn back. So our next couple of moves are going to be e6, followed by bishop b4 or c5. And, extra pawn, it's not a major advantage, but it's an extra pawn. So the basis of our repertoire is this Queen's Gambit accepted idea. Now let us go through the rest of the openings, starting with the bishop f4 London system. So after d4, d5, bishop f4, I'm going to recommend something I've been playing for years, which has worked tremendously well for me. We are going to lead the London player into a very favorable exchange Caro-Kann. That may sound strange, but we are going to get a Carlsbad structure with a better bishop compared to the exchange Caro-Kann. Let me just explain what I mean. If we started with e4 and c6, I'm sorry, there's something wrong with my internet connection. d4, d5 takes, bishop d3, knight c6, c3, knight f6, bishop f4. White has claimed both key diagonals with their bishops in the exchange Caro-Kann. And black's main strategic problem is going to be solving those two bishops. Now, let's compare that. I'm just going to delete this from the repertoire so that you don't have to look at the Caro-Kann. Let's compare that to this. Bishop f4, c5. Okay, they go e3, we take on d4, they have to take back with the pawn, because if they take back with the queen, then knight c6. And now knight c6. Okay, the pawn is hanging, so white would love to play bishop d3 to prevent bishop f5, but if they play bishop d3, we take on d4. So white must waste the tempo on either knight f3 or c3. Both moves are playable. Say c3, which is the more common move. And now we play bishop f5. Compare this to the Caro-Kann position we've seen, where our bishop was on c8 and white's bishop was on d3 because of the move order difference. And you will see that we have a good bishop. We have a bishop on f5. If white plays bishop d3, which they can do, we can just trade and get rid of the bad bishop, go e6. For example, knight f3, e6. I don't know what's going on. I mean, I do know what's going on. It's really windy. There's a storm outside, so, what can you do? And we have a good bishop. The only downside is the move queen b3. In most Caro-Kann semi-Slav structures where you move your bishop out of the pawn chain, b7 is hanging. So what if they play queen b3? Well, we are going to absolutely ignore that and take the bishop pair, bishop d6. Now, if white takes on b7, we take on f4, they have to take on c6, and we go king f8, we have the bishop pair and the massive initiative on the queen side in exchange for a pawn. If they don't, if they take on d6, we recapture, and b7 is pretty much immune. If you take on b7, rook b8 is coming, black has rapid development, and according to the engine of winning advantage. So after bishop d6, let's assume queen takes b7. Bishop takes f4, queen takes c6 check, king f8, for example, knight bd2, rook b8. Is this worth a pawn? The engine says it is. Black's better. And, b2 is hanging. If you play something like b3, then rook c8 just takes your c-pawn. Great position for black. Now, they don't have to play queen b3. They can play other things. They can play, I don't know, knight bd2, for example. But now we go bishop d6. Same thing, takes, queen takes, and so forth. Where, again, the key here is not to allow white to claim the diagonals for the bishops. So against the London, we are going to go into the Caro-Kann in a much more favorable way. Next up, we are going to talk about transpositions after 2 knight f3. And this you can see included in the repertoire, but I want to talk conceptually about what this signifies. So, since the basis of our repertoire is the QGA, the Queen's Gambit accepted, and since white hasn't played c4, we can say two things. If they play c4, we are going to go into the Queen's Gambit accepted. Fair. If they don't, we're playing a completely different opening we may not be used to. So there are a couple of openings in this repertoire. First of all, we start with knight f6. This is the most flexible move that's useful against everything black could play, and we're not committing to anything white could play. We're waiting for white to choose an opening. So first of all, if they go c4, we take it. That's easy. If they play the London, this is the so-called 2 knight f3 London. We are going to go c5 immediately. The same thing we did after 2 bishop f4. And after c5, e3, we are going to play a very rare, very good move, queen b6. Now, our goal against the London is to get the London player outside of the London system. We don't want to allow their typical pawn triangle stuff, here we play this, I know 100 moves of theory, I know all the ideas. No, queen b6 prevents that, because the only good move here is knight c3. Why is knight c3 the only good move? Well, if you play something like c3, I'm going to take your b pawn. If you play something like b3, I'm going to show you what happens, but it's not the London anymore, you just played b3. And if you play queen c1, then you're wasting a move technically to defend your b pawn. So the best move is knight c3, against which we play c4. The idea is, again, to put pressure on b2 and provoke a move like rook b1. And after this, after rook b1, we can simply continue with the move e6, play bishop d6, challenge this bishop, and then continue with queen c7, fighting for the diagonal, and they are outside of the London. The engine says black is slightly better here. There are many ideas here that white could fall for. So the only good move technically is a3. If they don't play a3, we can play bishop b4 followed by queen a5, putting pressure on a2 and c3. And of course, we would love to double their c-pawns, completely killing their counterplay on the queen side. And our long-term goal, of course, is going to be b5, b4 with an expansion. So white's going to have to play e4 at some point to even equalize. Now, what happens if they don't know knight c3? I've played this in 2 tournament games, and both times I've faced b3. b3 is not a good move. It's a waste of time. And after b3, the best move is bishop g4, getting the bishop outside of the pawn chain and, well, having no good pieces, no bad pieces. So experienced players are going to try to play c4, but London system players don't know how to play with c4, which is why this is a great setup. So bishop e2, we were threatening to, take on d4 after knight c6, so bishop e2, and now we simply exchange on d4, e takes d4, and knight c6. Again, we want to take on f3, take on d4. Very simple position, very easy to play. It's not the London, black's better, great position. Now, let us briefly mention the Torre attack. So instead of bishop f4, what if they go bishop g5? Now, there are many ways to play against this. Knight e4 is the main line, but we are going to go e6. And white can play knight bd2, or white can play e3, or there are other moves, but e3 is the main move. And the basis of our repertoire against the Torre is playing c5 before we develop the rest of our pieces, and we follow that up with knight bd7 and bishop e7, and eventually we play b6. So c5, c3, knight bd7, knight bd2, bishop e7, bishop d3, b6. We are playing a very standard position where eventually we will develop our bishop to b7, and in order for white to make progress, they either have to play e4, which doesn't work because it opens up our bishop on b7 and loses a pawn, which is why we played knight bd7 instead of knight c6 to prevent bishop f6, or they have to start playing moves like knight e5, which are, sort of the main line. But knight e5 doesn't work. We just exchange, go knight fd7, and when they trade on e7, there is no attack. So the Torre, not scary. There are other openings, and one opening which I would love to address, which we are going to have a look at in chapter 6 as well, is Catalan setups. I don't want to call this the Catalan because it's not. There's no pawn on c4. You could call it the pseudo Catalan. You could call it whatever you want. But let's just agree that when white plays g3, bishop g2, those are Catalan setups. Now, since they haven't played c4, we cannot go into our normal lines. Also, if they play c4 much later on, if we take, we're in an open Catalan. So we're not really happy with that. So what we're going to do, we are going to play c5 immediately. And now white could play c4, but it's not the open Catalan. This resembles the Tarrasch, if I had to name it. So cd4, bishop g2, dc4. Okay, very messy, but after queen d4, knight c6, queen d8, knight d8, black just has this pawn on c4, and white's going to have to waste time to take that pawn back. It's not like we can safely defend it. Don't play b5 because you're going to lose to bishop discoveries, but it's still fine. Most people are not going to go c4 though, against c5. They're going to play bishop g2. And we're going to have a look at this. Actually, I'm going to show it to you now. So let's do knight f3 transpositions and Catalan systems in the same chapter, because this is just a transposition you can find in both chapters in the repertoire. When they play bishop g2, we take on d4. And what does this mean? If you take with the knight, I have e5. And that's very scary. Eventually, once they take on d4, we play e5 anyway, expanding. If you take with the queen, I have knight c6 with tempo. That's another thing you don't want to do. So that's why c5 is very powerful. Let's say they castle. h6. Oh, this is a very important move because it prevents bishop g5, and it sort of prevents bishop f4. So it's not that easy to develop this bishop. If you go bishop f4, I just go g5 with tempo. So h6, a very subtle prophylactic move, but basically forces them to eventually play b3. So white's going to go b3. e6, bishop b2, and bishop c5. Now, you can either take with the knight straight away, or you can take with the bishop, allowing me to trade, and then take with the knight. Because if you ever take with the queen, I go knight c6, gaining that tempo once again. So once they take with the knight, we go e5. That's what we are trying to do. This is the whole idea behind c5. So against all Catalan systems, we're trying to achieve this. Not defending passively with e6, c6, close Catalan, blah, blah, blah. There's no pawn on c4, so we're not playing the open Catalan. Instead, we're going to create a broad center with e5 and d5 as soon as they take on d4. So something like knight f3 here, e4, knight d4, and castles is a great position for black, in my opinion. The bishop on c8 is good enough, you don't have to move it yet, and we're going to play knight c6 next. Okay, so that was the Catalan. In the repertoire, you will find many other lines as well. Okay, now let's have a look at the Jobava London. This is literally 8 moves deep because there is nothing else you have to know in order to play it successfully. So d4, d5, and by the way, if you want to learn each of these openings properly, I've covered it in great depth on the channel, so just search for the Catalan or the Blackmar-Diemer or the Queen's Gambit Accepted. You will get a lot more info there and the exact lines. Here I'm focusing on ideas. So knight c3, knight f6. This could still be bishop g5 or bishop f4, but now we're looking at bishop f4. The Jobava. Okay, so first of all, white's main idea is to put pressure on c7, but we are going to make a move that prevents that. You could play a6, which prevents knight b5 directly, but c5 does the same thing. Now if they go knight b5, we can simply go queen a5 check and we're winning, because after knight c3, we go cd4, and after queen d4, we go knight c6, followed by d4, winning the game. Game over, game over, game over. Or if they play queen a4, we can trade and go e5, gaining a couple of crucial tempi, and the engine says this is +3, bishop d2, bishop d7. This is just great. So against c5, knight b5 is still bad. So white goes e3. Okay, now we are still safe as long as they aren't able to deal with queen a5. Knight b5 isn't a threat. So what we're going to do, we're going to play cd4, ed4, going into a Carlsbad. Now let me explain why this is good. The Carlsbad, where black is playing for a minority attack, white wants to have a pawn on c3, not a knight on c3. So taking on d4 is, in my opinion, very disruptive for white. And we're going to play another disruptive move, bishop g4. Now, why are we playing this? Firstly, if they go bishop e2, we trade and go e6. We have gotten rid of our worst piece. In most Jobava systems, black has a bishop stuck on c8. If they want to play for an advantage, they have to play f3. Once they play f3, we go back to d7, again preventing knight b5. Because if they play knight b5, we take it, they take back, and we go knight c6. Now what we have here is a position where black has gotten rid of the light-squared bishop. Black is going to go e6 and bishop d6, and it's not really clear why white has this pawn on f3. So this is my setup against the Jobava. Very simple setup. Okay, so we did the Catalan already. Let's do the Stonewall and the rest of the obscure openings. So the Stonewall, as you probably know, is mainly an opening for black. Black plays in the Dutch against d4, but white can do it as well. And the last time I faced it in a tournament game was in the Dubrovnik Advent Open 2024. I won a very convincing game with the setup I'm about to show you. So white can start numerous different ways, although if they start with one f4, there are deviations you could go for. Let's assume they start with this sort of quiet Slav Colle System way. This could still be the Colle System, of course. They could play knight f3. This could still be the Queen's Gambit if they go c4. But whatever happens, we're playing c5 here. Now this prevents most c4 lines and makes most knight f3 lines uncomfortable unless they want to go into the main line Colle. So c3. Okay. Again, this could still be the Colle, this could still be the Stonewall after c3, but we are going to be looking at positions with f4. Now, before we put that on the board, what does this mean? Knight c6, f4. f4 means that white's playing for the e5 square. It also means that the bishop on c1 is stuck, it's a bad bishop, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to gain control over e5 if we can. So we're immediately playing the move bishop g4. White could play knight e2, but most people play knight f3. And after knight f3, e6, castles, bishop d6, white can play the move h3. This is the critical line. Now, we don't want to take on f3. It may seem strange that we aren't taking on f3, but there's a knight on b1 which could occupy e5 eventually, even if we took on f3. And we don't have another light-squared bishop to trade the knight off with. So we are going to make sure that e4 never happens, and we are going to play the move bishop f5. Again, this may seem strange, but we are completely giving away e5, signifying that we are never taking the knight on e5. We don't care about it, and white's going to have a knight on e5, but that's it. If this bishop isn't taken, we have firm control over e4. So if they, make a random... First of all, it's hard to make a move, because they want to go knight d2, and the bishop's hanging, so people are just going to take. If they don't take, if they play something else, like, I don't even know, b3, which makes no sense, but let's say, we can trade and play for the e4 square. But most people are going to take. So bishop takes f5. We, of course, recapture with the e-pawn if my connection starts working. Knight bd2, castles, knight e5. Again, we don't care about the knight. We go rook c8. We want to be able to recapture with the rook. Our long-term goal here is to gain control over e4 and play f6, getting rid of that knight. That's white's only good piece. White has this bad bishop on c1, so technically white has fewer pieces in play than us, unless they manage to play the famous Stonewall maneuver, bishop d7, e8, and somewhere, or in this case, bishop d2, e1, bishop h4. Watch out for that. Don't allow that to happen, if in any way possible. So this is the Stonewall setup. Very, very simple setup. Next up, the Pseudo Trompowsky. So d4, d5, bishop g5. Against this, again, literally 10 moves deep, but very powerful, f6. This is by far the best move. And the reason it's the best move, it's gaining a tempo on the bishop, and the bishop has no good squares to go to. This is the best engine move as well. So let's say they play bishop h4. Bishop h4 is, I think, the most popular move. We go knight h6. Now, knight h6 threatens knight f5, taking the bishop. In conjunction with our pawns moving to g5 and h5, threatening to trap the bishop, we want to force white to eventually play the move h3 to save their bishop, in which case we will be able to ruin their pawn structure. So the only good move here is f3. and white has a chance to lose the game straight away. If they play e3, which is, you know, the most natural move, it's already over. So knight f5, you have to save the bishop. Queen h5 does nothing. I just go g6. So bishop g3 and now h5. How do you save your bishop? If you play f3, I take. If you play h3, I take. So this is what we're trying to achieve. Takes, takes, and queen d6. This is a massive advantage for black, and it's already over. King f2, e5, black has everything. So against knight h6, white needs to play f3 to meet knight f5 with bishop f2. That means that, you know, we're not obliged to play knight f5. It makes no sense running into e4. Just continue with c5, undermining everything. And dc5 is the best move. If you don't play dc5 as white, e5 is coming with tempo, knight c6 is coming with tempo. So dc5, and this is what we want. We want to play e5 unopposed. Bishop f2, d4. Look at our center. The bishop's coming to e6. The knight's going to land on f5. Black is better. c5 is hanging. If you go b4, I go a5, undermining that. It doesn't work. So that's bishop h4. If they play bishop f4, we play c5 again. e3, knight c6, knight f3, and g5. Again, we're gaining space. You don't want to play g5 before the knight lands on f3 because of queen h5. And now h5, you have to save the bishop again, h3. Now we take on d4 and go knight h6 again. We have the f5 square. We can castle kingside, although we don't have to. And once we play knight f5, it's going to be a double attack on d4, so white should at some point play c3. Now, the most interesting thing about this position is that white cannot really castle kingside. As soon as they castle kingside, g4 is coming, and the position gets blown open. So where does white castle? In my opinion, nowhere. White does not castle, because we're going to have a bishop on g7. We're going to have the option to play f5. We can safely play rook c8. After, what I like to do here is actually bishop e6, f7, g6, or immediately bishop f5. And after f5, once this knight has moved, we just unleash both bishops. But it's going outside of theory. Okay, now I have faced the Colle system in my last tournament in the Trieste Open. The Colle system has, you know, there are many ways to enter it. But most commonly, people start with knight f3 and then they go e3. After c5, they go c3. The other system is technically not the Colle, it's the Colle Zuckertort, which is b3. The idea behind both systems is that you want to play for the e5 square, and similarly to what you do in the London system, except you're not leaving b2 hanging, and you're waiting to unleash that bishop later on. So knight c6, bishop b2, bishop g4, bishop e2, e6, a very standard setup. Nothing really outrageous about this against the Colle Zuckertort. Castles, bishop e7, knight b2 castles, and white should go c4 here. And the only thing we have to remember is that when they go c4, we take on d4, and take on e2, and go rook c8, playing for the c file. And after this, you're equal and very safe. And if they play the normal Colle, we basically do the same thing. Knight c6, bishop d6, castles, castles, and if they take on c5, take back. Now we're in a bad Caro-Kann for white. So technically, after dc, bishop c, white is playing the Karpov variation of the Caro-Kann, where they have a bishop stuck on c1, and they will most likely play b3, c4 in order to equalize, followed by bishop to b2. They can also go queen e2 and play for e4. So they have to either play c4 or e4, or they are busted. Okay, the final variation is the Richter-Veresov. So d4, d5, knight c3, knight f6, and now not the Jobava with bishop f4, but the Veresov with bishop g5. There is one thing you have to remember here. Against the Veresov, your setup is knight bd7. Why? We need to keep d5 defended without committing. We don't know what white's going to do. White can play f3 here, playing for an early e4. White can play queen d3, playing for an early queenside castles. White can play e3, playing a slow setup. They can also play knight f3. And the knight on d7 is saving our d-pawn, okay, and defending it multiple times without committing to a setup. That's very, very, very important. And it also allows us to play h6 without having doubled pawns. One of the things about Veresov is that this bishop is, can be used as a tempo gain. Now, if they take, we take with the knight. If they move out, we go e6. That's the second part of our setup. So knight bd7, e6, and the third part of the setup is c5. And this is all you have to know. You go knight bd7, h6, e6, c5. From here, you go bishop e7 and castle. And as soon as they play knight e5, you take it and go knight fd7. It's as simple as that. And you will never be in trouble, even if you don't know the exact move orders. That being said, I have included for queen d3, for f3, and some more concrete lines as well in the repertoire. So this is almost 50 minutes now. And my goal was to give you a playable repertoire for black against d4, which you can start playing within an hour. And hopefully you can do that now. If you have any questions, let me know. If you need me to clarify something, I will answer in the comments. Thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for more chess. Bye-bye.